Welcome, my name is Jarel, and maybe you are confused or in a state of despair looking at your purchasing power that is always going down and you want to know why. We have this fantastic technology and we could live in a paradise, but it's getting harder and harder to get a living. Why is that? So we have to look at our economic system. A lot of people are talking about, at the moment, of a collapse. The collapse of the ecosystem, the collapse of resources. What I want to present to you today is a collapse. What is collapsing is the economic system. Actually, it is a free market. The free market is collapsing, is dying, and will never come back. So it's a big claim, because we have been living with the free market for thousands of years. So it sounds a bit arrogant to say that it's dying now and will never come back. So for that, I will have to present you a new model, an original model, and make an original analysis that will take you from the Middle Age up to now and take you through the different transformations of the free market. And I have identified 5 transformations, and the last one being the one that will bring the collapse. And by doing that, we will also identify the dysfunctions of the free market. And the dysfunctions, there are many dysfunctions. For example, why do we have this debt that is always increasing, and whatever the government, we cannot solve the problem of the debt, it's always increasing. Why do we have that? Why do we have this? It's true that there is no balanced state. We cannot stabilize the economy. We have to be always in growth, otherwise we have recession. Why is that? Why do we go through these cycles of growth and recession? Why do we destroy our productive infrastructure when there is misery? And why do we do that? It's completely absurd. So you will be able to understand this thanks to this, because it can be very complex, but it's in a simplified way. It can be explained through this model. And once you identify the dysfunctions clearly, you can find solutions. It's like they appear automatically. So we will design or present 2 economic systems, one being an economic system that is transitional to the other one, and that will create a real paradise on Earth. So we will have this collapse, but what's coming next is a new economic system that will bring a paradise. So it won't be a doomed presentation. It's actually a finish. It's a happy ending. But don't go to the end straight away, because you might reject the solutions, because part of the solutions is something that is dear to you. You will have to let go something that is dear to you, but that is absolutely necessary if we want to create this world of abundance that is possible through technology. So don't go straight to the end, go through the whole process so that you will be able to accept the solution that will be presented. And I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you. We can divide society in 2 categories. On one side, you have the owners of the means of production of goods and services. To call them the owners of the means of production, it's a bit long, so I'd like to call them a shorter name. I could call them the capitalists, but it sounds like a class struggle. So I will call them the rich, even though it will still reflect a class struggle. But there is no better name. Those who want to enrich themselves, create or invest in means of production. And on the other side, you have all the others, those who need all the products, the goods and services, and we can call them the people or the consumers, even though everybody is a consumer. So let's give to the consumers an amount of money, and let's do like we do in every good investigation. Let's follow the money. The people will give their money to those who own the means of production, and in exchange they will receive the goods and services they provide. So now what's happening? The rich will spend the money between themselves to ensure the production and also for their lifestyle.
But then the money will have to come back to the consumers, because the consumers have needs every day and they are the same needs every day. So hopefully the same amount of money will have to return to the consumers. And for the money to come back to the consumers, to the people will have to work for the rich to receive a salary. So it's a new form of enslavement. For 40 hours and plus, the people will be like the servants of the owners of the means of production, and the masters like the slave masters. So it's a system of enslavement. It's not ideal, but that's how it works. Among the people, not everybody works for the rich, and some are artists, for example, or craftsmen, or work for themselves. So some of this money can be spent between the people before returning to the rich for buying their products. When we spend money, whether we are rich or poor, we can spend it in two ways: in consumable and perishable products that lose their value through time, or in products that can be resold and keep some value through time. For the sake of this presentation, let's call an asset everything that we buy that keep a value through time. And we will represent it by a piece of paper with a scribble on it and a signature. And this piece of paper says, I own this. It is attached to a product, or it can be a property, a car, or anything of value. But this asset, this piece of paper, gets its real value only when you can sell it. So the money will circulate in a loop that links all the participants, whether we are rich or not. And the money will flow like a liquid, and we speak actually money as a liquidity. So each time the money goes from one person to the next, some services have been given, but also sometimes some new product has been created. And that means we have created new wealth into the system. And what's important to notice is the larger the amount of money that is circulating in this loop, or the faster the money circulates in this loop, the more wealth we create. Here you can see, if you want to create wealth more quickly, you just have to inject some money into the system and increase the number of exchanges. Or you could also increase the speed at which money is spent. For example, during Christmas time, people buy more products, but also at a faster rate. And conversely, if you want to reduce the rate at which you create wealth, you reduce the amount of money in the system. In other words, to have some growth and more prosperity, we need to inject money into the system. And to slow down the growth or to go into recession, we need to remove money from the system. How do we inject money into the system? It's by making a loan to a bank. When you make a loan to a bank, the bank writes the amount of money you need or you ask for into your bank account, and it doesn't come from another bank account. It's created out of thin air. It's different with cash. Cash comes only from the central bank. It's when the central bank buys some bonds, some IOUs from the public or mainly from the government, that the central bank creates the cash. So, and how do we remove money from the system? Normally, we don't want to remove money from the system. We better have more than not enough. We remove the money from the system by reimbursing loans to the bank. When we reimburse our loan to the bank, the money is destroyed. But only the repayments of the loans will be destroyed. The interest, which are the payments given to the bankers for their services, are not destroyed, but will continue to circulate in the loop. So we need to represent the banks at two different places. The banks are the places where the money is created and destroyed, and it is represented by the yellow and orange arrows on the diagram. But also the bankers collect the interest of the loans, interest which can be quite significant, and on the long term bigger than the amount that has been loaned. And the amount of the interest is part of the purchase of the goods and services and continue to circulate in the loop. Here we notice already the power that is given to the banks and the money lenders in general, the power to expand or contract the economy and to create growth or a recession. In that way they can support or impeach governments by supporting or not their policies. If they want to get rid of a government, it's very easy for them to create a recession and blame the government for the bad state of the economy. This has been used many times in the past and in the present. All the crises, except when they are created by a natural phenomenon like a big storm or a flood, or when they are created by a shift in technology. For example, the arrival of the car has destroyed the horse industry. Otherwise, all the crises are created by a lack of money into the system, and they are financial crises. And the responsibilities relies on those who don't inject enough money into the system. There is another way when money is removed from the system. It is when you store it, when you keep it at home in a safe, for example. It is no more in circulation and it will be counted as an asset until it is spent again. There are also some leaks in the system. If the people lose some money, some cash, or if we have a trade deficit and the money is not returning back to the country, but keeps circulating outside the country. It is true for the US dollar, which is used for international trade and reserve currency, but also the euro, which can circulate within the eurozone. And on the opposite, if we have a positive trade balance, the money that is circulating outside the country can return back as an injection of money in the economy. Let's represent now the flow of money over a period of time, for example, 1 month. And the size of the arrows will represent the amount of money that has been exchanged. Let's suppose now that we have no leaks and the foreign trade is balanced. We have then 3 possibilities. The first one is when the consumer's income is greater than the amount of money they spend to buy the products from the rich. This case actually doesn't happen globally. It happens locally. It's when a business doesn't sell enough, doesn't make enough money to pay for the wages. And so this business is going bankrupt, so it will have to raise the prices of its products, or it will have to be more productive by reducing the payroll, by firing some people, or by reducing the salaries. In the free market, to survive, a business has to be profitable. So there is a selection that is happening here. Those who go bankrupt, those who cannot make their business profitable, will have to return to the other side, and they will have to work for the rich and be their servants. Another possibility is when the consumers spend more money buying the products than the money they have received by working for the rich. And we have here the case that is completely absurd, but unfortunately that is happening all the time. It's when the consumers cannot even afford the products they have themselves produced. To buy the production, the consumers must have borrowed money, or have bought at credit, or maybe they have had to use some savings and sold some assets to the rich. To borrow money or to sell assets is not something desirable, and it cannot last a long time. It's not sustainable. So the consumers will have to adjust their consumptions to the level of their income. They will buy less to spend only the amount they have earned and not buy the amount of products they have or they could have produced. The system will then evolve naturally towards a balanced state, which is the third case. It's a case where the amount of money spent to buy the products is the same amount that is received by the consumers as wages. But this balanced state is unstable. First, because when returning to the balanced state, the consumers buy less products, so the production has reduced and the profit has reduced. And if the production reduces, the businesses, to keep being profitable, will have to decrease the payroll and fire some people. So the total income of the consumers will be diminished. And the second reason is that in this balanced state, all the money that has been received from the sales of the products will have to be spent as a form of salaries. So globally, there is no savings to be made by the rich. And it is against the principles of the rich not to save any money and enrich themselves. So they want to see the money in their bank account increase. And if their business is not profitable, why doing business? This is the purpose of being in business, is to make money. We can represent everything on a graph, representing the income and the spending of the consumers. And the balanced states are represented by a blue line at 45-degree angle. Above the blue line is where the wages, the total wages of the consumers are greater than their spending. So it is a case where globally the businesses are losing money and it's not possible. Below the blue line, below the balanced state line, it's where businesses don't spend everything in salaries and can save some money and put it in the bank. On the blue line, it is a balanced state where you are all the money earned by the rich through the spending of the consumers returned to the consumers as salaries. So the more money in the system, the higher the balanced state on the line, the more dynamic the economy and the more wealth we produce, and the lower the amount of money in the system, the lower the balanced state, and the slower the economy. The owners of the means of production, the rich, don't want to spend all the money they earn, but want to save some of it and put it in the bank. And for that, they will have to operate below the blue line. The further away from the blue line, the more savings they can make. For the next period, the consumers will have less money to spend. How much less money? The amount that has not returned, that is the amount that has been put aside by the rich. The consumers will want to spend at the level of their income, that is at the level of the balanced state. But there are some leaks. They have to pay back their loans, because all the money comes from a loan, so they have to pay back their loans. So it will have to be a lower balanced state. And on top of that, the businesses want to make some money and reduce the salaries to end up below the blue line, below the balanced state. So the system, if nothing is done, will spontaneously go from a higher level of income and expenditure to a lower level of income and expenditure. So that means it will go spontaneously into recession. And we start a spiral of recession that can continue until everybody goes broke. So the economists who say that we should let the free market operate freely are completely mistaken. There is no invisible hand that will find a balance that is stable and fair. You know, the law of supply and demand, which should be called, demand, it's a bit deceiving. It's a bit like demand is like the needs of the people, but actually it's the income of the consumers. It's a law of the income of the consumer and the supply, but it's dictated by the income of the consumers. And the supply follows the level of the consumer's income that always tend to decrease. It is the owners of the means of production who can decide for both the prices of the products and the level of the wages. So the system will always be set to operate in their favor and at the expense of the consumers. The fact that there is no stable balanced state is a big problem, because we need always to have growth. We cannot stabilize without going down. So we need always to grow. We are addicted to growth. We always need to find new markets. We need to create new fashions to make the products old-fashioned quickly. We even have to plan obsolescence. Businesses try to replace their product as soon as possible to maintain a high level of consumption and to justify more salaries. Otherwise, we go into recession. The purpose of the owners of the means of production is to make money, is to enrich themselves, and they can only do that globally if the economy is growing. So if we don't want to have growth and all the problems it generates, we will have to change the system. Because this system, the free market, cannot function well without growth, without growing all the time. We must not confuse growth and progress. Progress is to make things better and faster. Progress really adds to our quality of life. Growth is to make more and more products, sell more and more stuff, so we justify more salaries and more profits. So growth is about making more and more, and if possible, more and more expensive. And progress, it's making things better, faster, and cheaper. We have seen that to create growth, we need to inject money in the system, and we inject money when we make loans at the bank. The rich have no problems to make loans because they have assets as collateral. They make loans sometimes because they are in a difficult financial situation, for example, to pay for the salaries, but mainly to expand their factories or to create new factories because there is a potential for a market to grow or because of new markets that have been created by entrepreneurs. So they will create jobs and increase the amount of salaries and therefore the amount of spending, and all the flow of money in the system will increase. But this does nothing to the gap, to the discrepancy between the consumption and the income of the consumers. To close the gap, to supplement their income, the consumers will have to borrow some money at the banks. But the banks are not especially keen to lend money to people who don't have any assets, unless it is at a very high interest rate, like with the credit cards. However, the banks will be keen to lend money to the consumers for their two main purchases, that are the house and the car. Because they are assets, you can repossess a house or repossess a car. If the consumers put a bit of money as deposit, it is likely that the banks don't lose any money when they repossess and resell the purchase. At this stage, you understand how important it is for the system that the consumers keep borrowing money to buy their houses and their cars, and hopefully new houses and new cars, so that it also creates jobs. Because it is this borrowing that will allow a gap between the spending and the income of the consumers. And now you understand the importance of giving the people the ideal of the American dream. To be happy, you have to own your house and your car, and you can borrow money, and hopefully you make a big family, because you need more people borrowing money than you have people paying back their loans. So the family needs to have many children. The population, to ensure the growth, need to always increase. The system, the free market as it is today, needs the borrowing of the consumers to complement their income, to pay for the goods they have themselves produced, and to ensure both the growth and the enrichment of the rich. And on top of that, it will ensure that the consumers will have to work for the rich for 30, 40 years to pay back their mortgage. So these borrowings act like a chain, or the chains that enslave the consumers who will have to work for the rich every working days of the week for many, many years. If we now sum up the flows of money in the system, we can consider the rich don't need to borrow more money than they need to pay back their loans. And we can observe that the money flows from the consumers to the rich, and that all the money that is injected in the system through loans will end up in the pocket of the rich. The free market today is a system that enriches the owners of the means of production and enslaves the people through loans. So now we have a problem. We have banks that can create money out of thin air, inject it in the system, and that goes to the rich, who accumulate something that is not worth accumulating. The purpose of the money is to circulate between the people to facilitate the exchanges, and it cannot or it shouldn't be accumulated somewhere in a bottleneck. If the rich accumulate too much money and there is too much money in the system, the money stops to be desirable and the system stops functioning. The money becomes worthless. So let's find out what the system will do or can do to make the money circulate from the rich back to the consumers. Because this is the problem. How can the money return to the consumers when it flows only in one direction towards the rich? In every system of flows, wherever you have a flow, you need to have somewhere a pump. For example, in the body, you have the heart that sucks the blood on one side and push it on the other side, so the blood circulates in the whole body. So what is the pump of the system that allows the money to circulate from the rich to the consumers so that the money circulates in a loop and cannot accumulate in a bottleneck somewhere?